My mom abandoned my sister and me for her new husband's baby. Now she says we're the selfish ones for refusing to call him family. I remember the day my parents sat me and my sister Emma down to tell us they were getting divorced. I was only 7, but even at that age, you can feel when things are falling apart. Emma was 9, and she had this tough girl act going on, trying not to cry, but I could tell she was hurting. We both were. They gave us the whole "it's not your fault" speech, like somehow hearing that would make it less crappy. It didn't. After the divorce, things were rough. We stayed with Mom, and she did her best to keep life going. But it was obvious she was struggling. She worked long hours, and when she was home, she was always tired or just not interested in spending time with us. We went from being a family to just 3 people living in the same house. It was like Dad took the glue that held everything together when he left. A couple of years went by, and that's when Brian came into the picture. I wasn't really paying attention at first. I mean, we were just kids, and it's not like we had a say in Mom's dating life. One day though, she introduced him to us over dinner. Brian was a nice enough guy, I guess, but he was kind of quiet and awkward, like he didn't know how to talk to kids. I remember sitting there, trying to figure out what was so special about him, but the real kicker wasn't Brian, it was Mason, his baby son. Mason was only a few months old when Mom started seeing Brian, and she instantly became obsessed with him. I'm talking full-on 24/7 mom mode, like she had hit the reset button on parenting. Emma and I just stood there, watching it happen like, what the hell is going on? She started acting like Mason was her own kid. I get that Brian was a package deal or whatever, but it felt like we got pushed aside for this baby that wasn't even ours. I remember one night when I was sitting at the table doing my homework, and Mason was crying. Mom was all over him, soothing him, rocking him, the whole thing. I couldn't help but think, where was all that attention when we needed it? Mom and Brian got serious pretty fast. It wasn't long before she started talking about us all being a family, and how she was so happy we were going to be a part of this new chapter in her life. She didn't ask how we felt about it though. Emma was old enough to be mad about it, but I think I was more confused than anything. One minute, it was just me, Emma, and Mom, and the next, we've got this stranger and his baby moving into our house. It felt like everything was changing, and we had no control over any of it. When Mom and Brian got engaged, things got even weirder. I remember she was super excited, like it was the best thing that had ever happened to her. She started planning the wedding right away. I don't even think she asked us what we thought about it. It was like we were just along for the ride, and our opinions didn't matter. Then, right before the wedding, my dad died in a car accident. It was like the worst timing possible. We were devastated. Emma was a wreck, and I didn't know how to handle it either. Dad may not have been around much after the divorce, but he was still our dad. Losing him hit us hard. You'd think, under the circumstances, Mom would have put the wedding on hold, right? Give us time to grieve, maybe? But nope. The wedding went ahead as planned. She didn't even hesitate. I'll never forget how cold that felt. She was all smiles, planning her big day with Brian, while Emma and I were barely holding it together. I remember thinking, is this really happening? Is this what's important to her right now? On the day of the wedding, it felt like we were in some alternate reality. I mean, here we were, just weeks after our dad died, standing there in fancy clothes, watching Mom marry this guy. I don't think either of us said a word the whole day. The ceremony was just weird. Brian's family was there, fawning over Mason like he was the star of the show. Meanwhile, Emma and I were trying not to cry. That's when the real shift happened. After the wedding, Mom told us, and this still blows my mind, she told us that if we wanted to keep seeing Dad's parents, our grandparents, they'd have to include Mason too. Can you believe that? She straight up said that we couldn't spend time with our own grandparents unless Mason was part of it. Emma lost her mind when she heard that. I think she yelled at Mom for a solid 5 minutes, and honestly, I don't blame her. It was like Mom was trying to erase our dad completely and replace him with Brian and Mason. Our grandparents tried to reason with her. They offered to take just me and Emma for weekends to do stuff like we used to, and they even said they'd pay for everything. But Mom wasn't having it. She said that if they wanted to see us, they had to see Mason too. I'll never forget the look on Emma's face when she heard that. It was like the final straw for her. She was done. Mom's reasoning was that we were all a family now, and Mason was a part of that. But here's the thing, he wasn't our family. He wasn't Dad's son, and he never met Dad. Why did he have to be included in everything related to Dad's side of the family? It didn't make sense to us, and no matter how much we tried to explain it, Mom just didn't care. Emma and I started distancing ourselves after that. We didn't want to be around this fake family dynamic that Mom was trying to force on us. It felt like Mason was her priority now, and we were just these extra kids she had to deal with. It was like we were being phased out of her life little by little, and there wasn't much we could do about it. Looking back, I realized that was the beginning of the end for our relationship with Mom. She was so focused on building this new life with Brian and Mason that she didn't notice we were slipping away. Or maybe she did, and she just didn't care. Either way, things were never the same after that. After the wedding, things got even more awkward between me, Emma, and Mom. It was like she expected us to magically adjust to this new life with Brian and Mason, like we could just flip a switch and start feeling like one big happy family. Spoiler, that didn't happen. Not even close. Mom started pushing this idea of family unity hard. She kept going on about how we needed to treat Mason like he was our little brother, which just felt wrong. I mean, yeah, Mason was a cute kid, but he wasn't our brother. He wasn't Dad's kid. He was just Brian's son. I don't know if Mom thought we'd forget about our real dad, or if she really believed we'd bond with Mason like he'd been there from the start. But that's not how things work. I remember one specific day that really hit me hard. It was Dad's birthday, a day that was always kind of sacred for us, even after the divorce. Emma and I would spend it with Dad's family. Our grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, people who actually knew him and loved him. We'd go to his favorite restaurant, sometimes visit his grave and just share memories. It was our way of keeping his memory alive. But this year, Mom decided things were going to be different. She sat us down a week before and said, "This year, we're celebrating your dad's birthday together, here at home, with Mason and Brian." I could feel my stomach drop. I was like, what? That was our time with Dad's side of the family. Mason didn't even know our dad, and Brian barely knew him. It felt like a slap in the face. Emma spoke up first, and she wasn't subtle about it. She said, "Why would Mason be there? This has nothing to do with him." Mom shot back with, "Mason is part of this family now, and it's important we all honor your father together. We don't exclude people in this family." I wanted to argue, but at the same time I knew where it was going. Emma and I had been having the same fight with her for months. No matter what we said, she always twisted it into us being selfish or not wanting to include Mason. It was frustrating because it wasn't that we hated Mason or anything. We just didn't want to force him into something that wasn't his. And let's be real, it was more about us not wanting our dad's memory turned into some awkward blended family event that felt fake. So, I tried to be calm and explain it. I said, "Mom, Dad's birthday has always been a thing with his side of the family. They were there for us when he died, and it means a lot to keep that going. Mason doesn't need to be there." She looked at me like I had just said the worst thing ever. "Lucas, you don't get to decide who is part of this family. If you want to honor your dad, you do it with all of us, or not at all." At that moment, I just knew there was no winning this argument. No matter what we said, she was going to make this about including Mason and Brian, whether it made sense or not. So we did the only thing we could. We stopped trying to argue. We figured it was better to go along with it for now and then do our own thing later. The day of Dad's birthday came, and I swear it was one of the most uncomfortable days of my life. Mom cooked this big dinner, and we all sat around the table like it was some kind of family reunion. Brian tried to make conversation with us about Dad, like he had any idea who he was. It was cringy. The whole time, I was just staring at my plate, counting down the minutes until I could leave. And then there was Mason. Poor kid didn't know what was going on. He was just running around, being a typical 3-year-old, completely oblivious to the fact that this day had nothing to do with him. I couldn't even be mad at him. It wasn't his fault. But it still felt wrong that he was there. After dinner, Mom pulled out this birthday cake. She had put "Happy Birthday, Dad" on it, and as we lit the candles, she made all of us, including Mason, stand around and sing "Happy Birthday." I remember standing there, my mouth barely moving, trying to keep it together. It felt like she was rewriting history, like she was trying to force this fake narrative that Mason and Brian were part of Dad's life somehow. But they weren't. They never were. Emma had it worse. She couldn't handle it at all. Halfway through the night she stormed out of the house, and I didn't blame her. I stayed behind because I didn't want to make things even more dramatic. but I wished I'd left with her. After that birthday, things just kept going downhill. Mom kept pushing Mason into more and more of our traditions, and every time we tried to push back, she'd accuse us of being cold or heartless. She'd say things like, "Mason's just a little boy. How can you be so cruel to him?" It was like she refused to understand what we were really upset about. It wasn't about Mason. It was about the fact that she was replacing our dad's memory with this new life she was building, and we were expected to go along with it, no questions asked. That's when I realized something that stuck with me for a long time. It wasn't just about blending families for Mom, it was about control. She wanted to control how we remembered Dad, how we lived our lives, and how we fit into her new version of what a family should look like. And if we didn't fall in line, we were the bad guys. I didn't know how to deal with it back then. I just knew I was angry. Angry at her for forcing Mason into everything, angry at Brian for going along with it, and angry at myself for not standing up to her more. But what could I do? I was just a kid, trying to hold on to whatever little bit of my old life was left. And the more I tried to hold on, the more it felt like it was slipping away. That year changed everything. Emma and I started distancing ourselves more and more from Mom and her new family. And while it wasn't the breaking point yet, it was the beginning of us realizing that things were never going back to the way they were. Things kept getting worse after Dad's birthday. It felt like no matter what Emma or I did, Mom was determined to shove this new family down our throats. I don't think she understood, or maybe she didn't care, how badly all this blending was affecting us. We couldn't just snap our fingers and accept Brian and Mason as replacements for Dad. But she acted like we were the ones being difficult. By the time I turned 18, I had pretty much reached my limit. The house didn't even feel like my home anymore. It was like Brian had taken over, and everything revolved around him and Mason. Brian wasn't a bad guy, but he wasn't my dad. He had his own way of running things, and I couldn't help but feel like an outsider in what used to be my house. Every decision, every rule, it was all Brian says this or Brian thinks that. I didn't care what Brian thought. I just wanted my life back, the one where my opinions actually mattered. One day, I was in my room, packing up some of my stuff, getting ready to move in with my girlfriend, Jess. I wasn't leaving because I didn't love my mom. I did. But I needed space. It felt like the walls were closing in on me. And I couldn't breathe with everything going on in that house. Jess and I had been planning this move for months, and I was finally ready to get out. Mom came into my room while I was packing. I could tell from the look on her face that she wasn't happy about it. "So, you're really going through with this?" she asked, crossing her arms. I nodded. "Yeah, Mom. It's time." She stood there for a minute, not saying anything, just watching me throw stuff into boxes. Then she sighed and said, "I don't understand why you're running away from your family." That word, family, hit me hard. I stopped what I was doing and turned to her. "I'm not running away from family," I said, "but this doesn't feel like my family anymore." Her face changed. She looked like I had slapped her. "What are you talking about? Of course this is your family. We're all in this together." I couldn't believe she still didn't get it. "Mom, ever since you married Brian, everything has been about him and Mason. It's like Emma and I don't even matter anymore. We're just here. You're trying to replace Dad with them and I can't deal with it." She shook her head, frustrated. "I'm not trying to replace your father. I just want us all to be a family. Why can't you see that?" I didn't know how to explain it to her. It wasn't that I didn't want a family. I just didn't want this forced version of it. "I don't feel like I'm part of this family," I said, trying to stay calm. "I feel like I'm stuck in someone else's life." Mom looked like she was about to argue again, but then she sighed and sat down on the edge of my bed. "I just want you to be happy," she said quietly. "I want us all to be happy." "I know, Mom," I said, softening a little. "But I'm not happy here. I need space. I need to figure things out on my own." We sat in silence for a minute. I could tell she didn't want me to go, but at the same time, she knew I had made up my mind. After a while, she stood up and left the room without saying anything else. I went back to packing, feeling a mix of guilt and relief. It wasn't that I wanted to hurt her, but I couldn't keep living like this. Moving in with Jess felt like a breath of fresh air. I finally had my own space, a place where I could be myself without all the drama. Jess understood what I was going through, and she supported me every step of the way. For the first time in years, I felt like I could actually relax. But of course things weren't quiet for long. About a week after I moved out, Mom called me. She wasn't happy. She said I hadn't been around enough to see Mason, that he missed me, and I needed to make more of an effort to include him in my life. I couldn't believe it. Even after I left, she was still pushing this whole Mason is your brother thing. It wasn't that I hated the kid. I didn't. But I didn't see him as my brother, and I wasn't going to pretend I did just to make Mom feel better. I tried to explain that I needed space, that I was focusing on my own life now, but she didn't want to hear it. She just kept talking about how Mason was hurt and how I was abandoning my family. The guilt trips were relentless, but I wasn't caving this time. I'd finally gotten out, and I wasn't going back. Things stayed tense after that. I didn't go back to the house, and I didn't visit much. Emma had already started distancing herself too. She wasn't as vocal about it as I was, but she felt the same way. It was like we were slowly being pushed out of Mom's life, and Mason was taking our place. It hurt, but what could we do? Mom had made her choice, and we had made ours. It was quiet for a few months after that. I thought maybe we'd finally hit some sort of balance. Mom with her new family, and me with my new life. But then, out of nowhere, she showed up at my job. I was in the middle of a shift when she walked in. I could tell by the look on her face that she wasn't there to chat. She was pissed. I wasn't sure what had set her off this time, but I had a feeling I was about to find out. "We need to talk," she said, crossing her arms and glaring at me. I sighed. "Mom, I'm at work. Can't this wait?" "No, it can't," she snapped. "I'm tired of you ignoring your family. Here we go again." I tried to keep my voice calm. "I'm not ignoring my family. I've been busy." "Busy? Too busy to see your own brother?" she shot back. I clenched my jaw. "Mason is not my brother." That did it. Mom's face turned red, and I could see her hands shaking. "How dare you say that? I raised him like he was my own son. He is your brother, and you're treating him like he doesn't even exist." I had had enough. I wasn't going to let her guilt me into something I didn't believe. "Look, I didn't ask for this, okay? I didn't ask for you to remarry or bring Mason into our lives. I'm not saying I hate him, but he's not my brother. He's Brian's kid, and I don't have to include him in my life if I don't want to." Mom stood there, staring at me like I was a stranger. "I can't believe you've turned into this person," she said, her voice low. "I thought I raised you better than this." I didn't know what else to say. I just looked at her and said, "Maybe you didn't raise me at all." After that confrontation with Mom at my job, things between us went from bad to worse. I didn't think they could, but here we were. The tension had been building for years, but now it was like we were in this silent war. She wasn't talking to me, and I wasn't making any effort to reach out either. It felt like something had broken that couldn't be fixed, and honestly, I didn't have the energy to try and mend it anymore. A couple of weeks went by, and I thought maybe we'd just leave things where they were. I didn't mind the silence. I was finally getting some space, and I could focus on my own life without all that family drama weighing me down. But of course, it wasn't going to stay quiet for long. Mom had a way of pulling you back in, whether you wanted to or not. One night, I was at home with Jess, just relaxing after a long day, when my phone started blowing up with texts. It was Mom. She hadn't texted me since our fight, so I figured this wasn't going to be anything good. I didn't even want to open them at first, but the notifications just kept coming, so I finally gave in. The texts were long, really long. I had to scroll for a minute to get through all of it. She was ranting about how I'd abandoned the family, how Mason was asking where I was and why I wasn't visiting anymore. She said I was hurting him by not being around, and that I was being cruel to a little kid who had done nothing wrong. I just sat there, staring at my phone, completely drained. It was the same argument over and over again. She couldn't accept that I didn't see Mason as my brother. She refused to let it go, and now she was making it sound like I was some villain for not playing along with her perfect family fantasy. I didn't even know how to respond. Jess, sitting next to me, saw my face and asked, "Is it your mom again?" I nodded. "Yeah, she's saying the same stuff, that I'm being unfair to Mason, that I'm hurting the family." Jess rolled her eyes. "She doesn't get it, does she?" "Nope," I said, tossing my phone on the table. "She's never going to get it." Jess put her hand on my shoulder. "You don't owe her anything. You've done everything you could to explain how you feel. If she doesn't want to listen, that's on her. I knew she was right, but it didn't make it any easier. There was always that nagging guilt, even though I knew Mom was in the wrong. Part of me still felt like I was the bad guy. I wasn't trying to hurt Mason, and I didn't want to make him feel left out, but at the same time, I couldn't keep pretending like this whole situation was normal. A few days later, things took a turn. Mom started calling me, and I ignored the first couple of calls, figuring she was just going to keep pushing the same argument. But then she left a voicemail that caught me off guard. In the voicemail, she wasn't just upset anymore. She was angry. Like really angry. Her voice was shaking, and she said something along the lines of, "If you want to be part of this family, you need to step up and stop acting like a child. Mason is your brother, whether you like it or not, and if you keep ignoring him, you're going to lose your family. You're better than this, Lucas. I didn't raise you to be so selfish." That last part really got under my skin. Selfish? I had spent years trying to keep the peace, trying to balance what I needed with what Mom wanted. I had bent over backwards to make things work, but now I was being called selfish because I didn't want to play along anymore. It felt like everything I had done for her, for our family, didn't matter. All she cared about was Mason and her version of the family she'd built around him. I played the voicemail for Jess later that night, and she just shook her head. "She's trying to guilt trip you again," she said. "You don't have to listen to that." I knew she was right. I had been guilt-tripped for years, but it was like a reflex now. Part of me still felt like I owed Mom something, even when she was clearly in the wrong. A few days passed, and then something happened that really pushed me over the edge. Mom showed up at Jess's apartment. She didn't even call or text me beforehand. Just showed up at the front door demanding to talk. Jess opened the door, and I could hear Mom's voice before I even saw her. She was upset, and she wasn't going to leave until she got what she wanted. Jess came back to get me, looking a little shaken. "Your mom's here," she said. She's kind of freaking out." I didn't want to deal with it, I really didn't. But I couldn't just leave her standing out there either. So, I went to the door. The second she saw me, she started in. "We need to talk now," she said, her voice sharp. I didn't even invite her in. I just stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "What do you want, Mom?" She crossed her arms and glared at me. "You need to stop this. This is ridiculous, Lucas. You've cut off your own family for no reason." "I didn't cut off my family," I said, trying to stay calm. "I just don't want to be part of something that doesn't feel real." Mom threw her hands up. "Mason is real. Brian is real. This is your family, whether you want to accept it or not. I don't care about that," I shot back. "You're trying to force something that I don't believe in. Mason isn't my brother, and Brian isn't my dad. I'm not going to pretend like they are just to make you happy." That's when she said it. The thing that really made me see red. "Well, if you can't accept them as family, then maybe you don't deserve to be part of this family either." I just stood there, staring at her, trying to process what she had just said. I couldn't believe it. She was willing to throw me away because I wouldn't fall in line with her new family. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just turned around and went back inside, closing the door behind me. I could hear her shouting outside, but I didn't care anymore. Something had snapped inside me. All the guilt, all the pressure. It was gone. If she wanted to cut me off, fine. I wasn't going to keep fighting for a place in a family that didn't even feel like mine. That night, I blocked her number. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was necessary. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. After I blocked Mom's number, things went quiet. Really quiet. I thought maybe she'd try to get in touch through other people, maybe Jess, maybe Emma. But nothing. It was like a switch had flipped, and just like that, the drama stopped. At first, it felt weird. I'd been so used to the constant pressure, the guilt trips and the manipulation that when it all stopped, I didn't know what to do with myself. But slowly, the silence started to feel like a relief. I spent a lot more time with Jess, focusing on our life together. For once, I wasn't carrying around all this weight from my family. Jess and I could actually enjoy our time together without me constantly checking my phone or stressing out about the latest thing my mom had done or said. It felt like I was finally living my own life, and not the one Mom had tried to force me into. But of course, peace never lasts forever. One day, a few months after everything went down, I got a message from my aunt, Mom's sister. I hadn't spoken to her in a while, but we'd always gotten along pretty well. She didn't take sides during all the drama with Mom, which I appreciated. The message was short and kind of vague. It just said, "Hey, can we talk? It's important." I knew something was up, so I called her. She answered on the first ring, and the first thing she said was, "Lucas, have you talked to your mom lately?" I sighed. "No, I haven't. We're not really in contact anymore." There was a pause on the other end. I could tell she was trying to figure out how to word whatever she was about to say. "Well, I don't want to get in the middle of things, but you should probably know that your mom's been telling everyone that you and Emma abandoned her and Mason." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. Here we go again. "She's saying we abandoned her?" I asked, my voice tight. "Yeah," my aunt said softly. "She's telling people that she tried to reach out to you both, but you've been ignoring her, that you're refusing to be part of the family, and she doesn't know what to do." I couldn't help it. I laughed, even though none of this was funny. Of course, she's the victim now. Classic. "I don't know all the details, Lucas," my aunt said, her voice a little defensive. "I'm just telling you what she's been saying. I didn't want to get involved, but I thought you should know." "Thanks for letting me know," I said, feeling my anger start to build again. "But she's twisting the truth. She cut us off the second we didn't play by her rules. She wanted us to accept Mason as family, and when we didn't, she wrote us off." There was a long pause on her end, like she wasn't sure how to respond. Finally she said, "Well, I thought you should hear it from me rather than through the grapevine." "I appreciate it," I said, trying to keep my frustration out of my voice. "But honestly, I don't think there's anything left to fix." After I hung up the phone, I sat there for a while, just thinking. It was hard to wrap my head around the fact that, after everything, Mom was still trying to make us out to be the bad guys. It was like she couldn't handle the idea that she'd pushed us away, so instead, she flipped the script and made it look like we were the ones who'd abandoned her. That's when I realized something. This wasn't about Mason or Brian or any of the family drama. This was about control. Mom had always needed to be in control of everything. She needed to control the narrative, control the family dynamic, control how we remembered Dad, and when Emma and I stopped letting her control us, she lost it. A few days after the call with my aunt, I decided to reach out to Emma. We hadn't talked much since everything blew up, but I knew she was going through the same stuff I was. We set up a time to meet for coffee, and when we finally sat down, it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. Talking to her felt different now, like we were on the same page in a way we hadn't been before. "I talked to Aunt Sarah," I said after we'd settled into our seats. Emma raised an eyebrow. "Yeah? What did she say?" I told her about the conversation, about how Mom was telling people we'd abandoned her. Emma rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. "Of course, she's playing the victim," Emma said. "She always does. It's never her fault." "I know," I said, shaking my head. "But it still pisses me off. Like, how can she not see that she did this? She's the one who pushed us away." "She doesn't want to see it," Emma said, taking a sip of her coffee. "She's never going to admit she's wrong. In her mind, she's this perfect mom who's just trying to hold the family together, and we're the ungrateful kids who don't appreciate her." That hit me harder than I expected. Perfect mom? Was that how she saw herself? I guess it made sense. In her world, she probably thought she was doing everything right, that she was creating this happy blended family. But the reality was so far from that. "I don't know what to do anymore," I admitted, leaning back in my chair. "I've tried everything. I've explained how I feel. I've tried setting boundaries, and nothing works. She just ignores it and keeps pushing her version of things." Emma nodded. "Same here. I've been trying to distance myself for years, but every time I do, she pulls the poor me card and makes me feel guilty." We sat in silence for a while, both of us just processing everything. It felt good to talk to Emma about it, though. It made me realize I wasn't alone in all this. We were both dealing with the same thing, and neither of us had the answers. But at least we had each other. "I guess we just have to accept that this is who she is," Emma said finally. "She's not going to change. She's always going to try and control us, and we have to decide how much of that we're willing to put up with." I nodded. "Yeah, I guess so." We finished our coffee, and as we left the cafe, I felt a weird sense of closure. I wasn't happy about how things had turned out with Mom, but I wasn't as angry anymore. I'd done everything I could to make things work, but sometimes, no matter how hard you try, people just won't change. And that's not on you. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could move forward without the weight of all this family drama on my shoulders. Maybe things with Mom would never be the way they used to be. But I had my own life to live now, and I wasn't going to let her control that anymore.